So I've trimmed all the pieces to size. Now I'm just double checking the fit. Um, and I also want to sort of dry fit the box in terms of checking all the edges to make sure that they're all the joints are tight and square. Um, and you can really just do this by visually inspecting them. And I can feel that some of the edges are a little bit angled, as you can see here. It's got a slight angle to it from when I cut it, which is a pretty common problem. So you can square them off just by taking some 120 grit sandpaper and then basically pushing the board back and forth while holding it perpendicular to the paper, so you get a nice square 90-degree edge. And you want to be careful not to do too much sanding, otherwise you're going to end up with an undersized piece of cardboard. So you keep doing this, keep checking the edges, and do this to all the sides that you inspect that aren't square. So once you have all the pieces cut, you have the edges all squared up, the next thing we do is we start gluing pieces together. So we're going to glue one piece at a time. And so we're going to add a bead to the end of the base. And we're going to add a bead of PVA or Elmer's glue. And try and be neat about this. Wipe off any sort of drips or overflow on the edges. You're still going to have a little bit of glue come out. So make sure you're working on a surface that you're not concerned about getting glue on. And then we're just going to line this up. We're going to push it together and we're going to prop it against Elmer's glue to sort of set up a little bit. Once the glue is set up a little bit, we're going to work on the next side, which involves basically adding a couple pieces of tape, which unfortunately is happening off camera, to the edge. That's going to meet up with the side that's been glued on so far to hold it in place. And then we're going to add beads of glue along the bottom and along the edge that's going to meet up with the side that's already been glued on. And so we're just going to add the bead of glue, and again, being careful not to add too much glue. You don't want a bunch of glue on the inside of your box, because if it dries up, it's going to create a really ugly finish, or at the very least a problem you're going to have to deal with later. So once the glue's on, then we just carefully align this up. Make sure everything's square. This is when you're going to really make sure that the side is square, because you're going to align the edges. You're going to bring the tape in, and then basically with a little bit of fussing, get it set. This is a little fussy. You just want to make sure that the edges are nice and tight and everything's nice and square. And then just push it so it's nice and flush. And again, I'm just making sure that there's no glue anywhere and everything's sitting square. And now we're going to let it set up and dry before we move on to the next piece. So now that we've got the two sides glued up and it's setting a little bit, I'm going to add a couple pieces of tape just to make sure the joints stay nice and tight. So I've added a piece of tape on the end to prepare for the next glue up, and now I'm going to add another piece of tape on the bottom here to basically just make sure it stays nice and secure and doesn't wander as we keep working with it. Unless you have 15 minutes to sit and wait for glue to dry, it's usually helpful just to add a little piece of tape here and there. So now that that's ready to go, we can start preparing to glue up the next side. So again, always check your fit first. Looks good. So then the next step is to add the glue. So we're adding glue to the bottom edge and to the edge that's joining up with the side. Again, go easy on the glue. You don't need that much. So I've got along the bottom and then along the edge that's going to meet with the side piece. I'm going to add the glue here. And then we're going to go through the same process where we line it up, use the tape to hold it in place, and then let it set up and dry. And again, make sure that you're managing sort of the glue inside. So nice and square, tape it together. You want to move it off of the mat that you're gluing on periodically, just to make sure that you don't end up with your box glued to the table. So this looks pretty good. So we're going to glue on the last side of the box. We're going to add a bead of glue along the plane that joins up with the bottom and the two sides that already are in place here. And again, so we go slow and steady with the glue. Try and keep it close to the edge. Keep it as even as possible. And then once you've got the glue on, then you're ready to join it up. Okay, now to glue it up, we're going to add tape to the bottom and the two sides. So first we'll add tape to the bottom. We'll move our piece out of the way for a second, lift our box up. And again, you want to avoid sort of manhandling the box. So we're going to carefully lift the box up, just using, there you go, and then we'll secure the tape to the bottom. We're going to add tape to the side, and you can see I'm folding over the tape just so I have like a little handle to grab when I want to remove the tape afterwards. And so I'm going to do that for both sides. Add the tape to the back, make sure it's nice and secure. Now we're going to center this. And again, you want to make sure that your corners are lining up, everything is flush. Then you may have to do a little squaring up top and bottom, and then you just pull the tape into place and work from one side to the other. So you can say I put the tape in place on the side, then I put the tape in place in the middle, make sure my sides are square and flush, and then push the tape in place. And now we're just going to let it set up. So the last thing I want to do before it dries up is basically scrape all the glue out of the inside. I'm just using a scrap piece of board here to basically just get in all the edges. Make sure to support the corners. You don't want to knock everything out of square. But basically just clean up the glue on the inside so that the box is nice and clean when it sets up. Because if you let the glue dry inside, you're going to have to chisel it out, or you're just not going to be able to get it out, and you're just going to have a really ugly corner, and you want a nice clean corner. So